to meeting the guests. It's a time for the icebreaker. Please explain, Nico, what it is to our attendees and how we're gonna do it.
So typically what we do is we put you in a room with two lions, and if you cannot fend for yourself and survive, you don't survive and you don't make it out alive. JK.
All
So
right, so
Bring it.
what
go
we
ahead.
what we do is we're going to put you in a room of typically 3, maybe 4 participants, and the objective is to get to know each other, to see where you guys are all investing, what your levels is at, what your focus is, your goals. Talk about your job, what you currently do, and what you would like to do in the future, and hopefully you can make some connections to where you can then make a valuable connection, and afterwards have a nice person to talk to. That's the goal.
All right,
um,
great. So now we have about 15 people, so maybe make it 3 rooms or 4. 4? Let's try 4.
okay, so 4 rooms would be 3 to 4 per room. You want to do
Yes.
that?
Yep.
All right, so guys, so let's remember. So you're going to introduce yourself one at a time. Say your name, where you're from, and where you are investing, and maybe a little bit about your goals and why you are interested in either multifamily or seller financing. So I will see some of you in some of these rooms, and Joseph and I will call you out at some point in a few minutes. Have fun, enjoy, and
Have
we will see
fun,
you soon.
guys. See you soon.
Yeah, I can see you. Can you hear me? I can't hear you.
Okay, there we go. Now I'm unmuted. I'm
Yeah.
actually not in a room, and I've just been, as people are coming in, I'm just assigning people. So I thought that you weren't there. Um, let me see. I'm just now, like, I'm still, people are still coming in. I'm just assigning them to rooms, and the rooms are getting pretty packed. So now there's only 3 rooms with like 5 people in each room. All right, so Joe, we'll chat for a little bit. Who are you? Where are you from? What's your deal?
I guess I'm from Wisconsin. Um, and I'm working on trying to, get into some multifamily investing stuff. So I joined Jake and Gino and uh, been doing some work with those guys and some coaching and mentoring and stuff. Just saw you had a event going on here that I'd jump on once and see what it was all about.
Awesome, man. Well, good. I'm glad to have you here. I didn't. So you're in Jake and Gino too. Great, great, great. How long have you been in Jake and Gino for?
It was earlier this year that I joined, so I think it was like February timeframe. I'd have to look to be sure, but
Cool, cool. Yeah. And how are you liking it so far? What's up, Craig? What's up, Shane?
Okay.
yeah, it's been good. Learning a lot of stuff, and got a lot of good resources there. Went down to an event this last weekend down in Knoxville, so um,
Oh, you did the money mixer.
yeah, yeah.
Cool, man. Yeah, I wish I was there. I couldn't make it there. Good. Well, Joe, I'm glad to have you. I think I'm going to call everybody out of their rooms in a minute. Craig, we got Craig on here too, and Shane. So Shane seems to be muted or not visible right now. So Craig, my man, Craig, you are in the mastermind, right?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Okay, yeah,
Yeah, I'm in the mastermind.
cool, man. And how are you liking that so far?
I mean, from a networking perspective, it's great. I can't say that I've learned the tremendous amount from the mastermind. Um, but the network is so far has been really valuable.
I think that's Marco's biggest strength. He's Mr. Network. Like
Right.
he's on the phone with people all day, you know.
Yeah, he's a facilitator. He brings people together and puts deals together. So it's cool. I like that.
Yeah, I definitely like it too. But so I'm glad we met and we're talking about doing stuff too. And now we got Joe and Shane. And actually Shane was going to be putting it, I don't know if you did it already, Shane, but I spoke with Jamie and I think you guys are going to put an offer on the Lincoln as well, on the 7 unit in Florida, in Tampa. You might be silent right now. Joe, have you been, are you currently a real estate investor or are you just looking to get in?
Looking to get into multifamily. I do own some actual farmland.
Cool, man.
So I've got that leased out, but that's a little different than multifamily stuff.
What do you do for a living?
Uh, electrical engineering type position. So right now I'm developing a program for a robot and controller and an interface, and so
That's awesome, man. That's really cool. You should link up with Brian Mullen. He's a whiz on the technical side.
yeah.
Jesse.
Hey, what's happening, guys?
Hey, Jesse, how
on?
are you?
Hey, man.
Good. Yourself?
We got cut off.
Good, good.
I was in the middle of a spiel.
Yes.
Hey, Craig,
What's up, Yusuf?
how's it going?
Hey,
Hi,
bro.
Joe. How are you?
What's up,
Nice.
Yus? What's going on?
What's
Hey.
going on, Bob? Hey.
Good, good. How you doing, Nico?
Hey, Bobby.
All right. So today, guys, we have a very special guest, and as usual, Nico is gonna introduce him and let us know who he is. Go ahead, Nico, please.
All right. People are still coming in, which is crazy. So I'm sorry for those people that are going to be waiting another minute while I read this. We got Larry Fiero. Larry went from being in debt to owning 10 properties that have allowed him to invest in real estate full time. Larry invests in multifamily properties, and he has purchased every single property using seller financing. Larry is the host of the Real Estate Marathon and co-owns Dragon Rock Properties with his wife, Heather. His success is one of small steps in everyday properties, which has become a recession-proof vault of financial security. His path is also one that anyone, regardless of current finances, can realistically follow, and is something he loves talking about, which he is about to do.
How's everybody doing tonight?
Well,
Good.
Great,
Good.
Law.
I'm excited about this because I had to find an outlet for talking real estate because my wife is a little tired of it. Do you guys want me to share my screen so I can at least start at the beginning? Because the way I usually work it is I get started with the owner financing, and then a lot of times your questions pop up because of what I'm going over. It's not a topic that a lot of people understand, and that's including brokers, that's including real estate agents and the like. So part of what you guys are going to have to do is, if you want to be successful at it, you're going to have to learn how to do owner financing and then teach the people that are going to be working for you how to do it, because there's just not a lot of information out there for it when you first go to it. So let me see if I can share my screen. I'm not technologically savvy, so if this doesn't work, I apologize. But
That's okay.
try
Yeah.
it.
Try at
Oh,
the bottom.
Hi, CS. I see you now. Hey, CS. Welcome.
Okay. Is
You
that
got it.
working?
Yep.
Yes, we're seeing it.
Nice. Nice. All right. Let me start the slideshow here. And we can. All right. You'll have to bear with me. Like I said, I'm not tech savvy. I usually have my wife do this for me. All right. All right. So the mini seller financing presentation. And let me get rid of I don't like the subtitles.
All right. This is nice.
Yeah. I actually gave a presentation for the Multifamily Investor Nation Summit.
Oh,
It was
nice.
An hour-long presentation with Dan Hanford, and they put me on right after Rod Cleef. So that was interesting to follow in his shoes. But I got about 20 minutes in, and the questions just took over. So that's what I did. I answered all the questions for the rest of them. So there are several different ways of doing owner financing, but I like to talk about two of the main ways is just your standard seller financing. And what a standard seller financing is basically, here's some information. It's owner financing. It's a method most people think of when they're talking about it. So what this is, the seller actually generally has a free and clear property, or mostly free and clear property, and they actually act as the bank. So you make an offer to them, they write you a mortgage, and it turns into an identical transaction to a standard transaction that everybody's used to, except you don't have to deal with a bank. So that actually keeps the closing costs down. That keeps a lot of the expenses in check. So when you make payments, you'll be making your payments directly to the seller. The person, if you offer up interest, that's an interesting case study, because a lot of times you can get away with not offering interest, that I found. Seller can also foreclose on the property just like a bank. So if you don't make your payments, the seller can come after you and they can take that property back. And that's not something that you really should strive for, because they take and put a lot of trust in you when they're selling you their property with seller financing. So you really, if you want to develop a reputation in the industry as a closer and as somebody who can perform the notes that are offered to you, you've really got to make sure that you have 0 late payments. You have to have a fiduciary responsibility to the seller. You have to make sure that their interests are taken care of, because what'll happen, and this is something that's happened to me, is for future reference, you can use those guys as references and have them get their phone numbers. And when you're talking to somebody else about doing an owner finance property, you can say, well, I've got 5 different people that I've purchased owner finance properties from, and they are willing to give you a reference and tell you how I've performed on the notes, tell you if everything is going well with it, and just let you know that I'm not somebody that's going to mess around with your money. So the more people you have in your corner, the better off you'll be. That'll be easier to get seller financing. Okay, how to go about it. Okay. There's a few things that you got to look for. Okay. This right here is when I start telling you about some of the things that you need to look for. Motivated sellers. These are people that, you know, the property's been on the market for a little while. You've driven by it. You've found the fact that the property, maybe the grass isn't cut. They're not maintaining it. There's a lot of deferred maintenance on the property. And you can just tell by looking at these properties that the landlord is getting tired of being a landlord or just can't handle the situation anymore. There's a lot of different reasons why a person could be motivated. Another way that I like to find is you send out direct mail marketing. And what that is you look for specific criteria that you can get a mailing list for. You know, are they out of state owners? Have they got 90% or 80% equity in the property? Do they have a mortgage on it? You can buy these lists and then just start sending direct mail to them. And a lot of times the people will contact you, letting you know whether they're interested in selling. And you know, you got to be ready for that phone call where they tell you to lose their number and stop bothering them, stop harassing them, and that sort of thing. But that doesn't happen in a lot of cases. And one of the other tips that a lot of times I've heard people use is that if you drive by and you see a sign out in the road for a property for rent, call up that number and ask the person there if they're interested in selling the property. Because a lot of times if you have a vacant property, they may not even want to know, they may not even know they want to sell it until you approach them with it. So, and you're looking for properties that are in disrepair. Like I said, properties owned free and clear. Okay, this is probably the hardest part of owner financing. One of the number one skills that you guys are going to need, you gals are going to need to owner finance is you have to be able to listen to what the sellers want. Why are they getting out of it? You know, there's a lot of different reasons why a person wants to get out of being a landlord. They're tired of dealing with tenants. They're tired of, you know, just the whole rigmarole of being a landlord in general. Maybe they're retiring. Maybe they're getting to that age where they want to retire, but they don't want to pay capital gains. And that's actually going to be a little bit later in there, because I imagine a bunch of you are sitting here thinking to yourselves, well, I can understand what the benefit is to the buyer, but what are the benefits to the seller? And there are actually a lot of benefits to the seller that we'll talk about. Maybe health reasons. One of the properties that I purchased, the woman had gotten promoted out of state, and she lived 4 states over and was still trying to run this duplex that she couldn't handle. And she actually had put it on the market and wasn't even realizing that she wanted to do owner financing. But at that point, she was just so ready to be done with it that she was going to jump on any offer that came through. And an inheritance, a lot of times you'll have maybe an older person that passes away, has all these rental properties, and they leave them to their children, and the children just don't want to be landlords. They just want to get rid of it. They want to offload it and send it to the first person that comes along and turn it into a cash inheritance. So these are all reasons that you need to figure out. So when you find a property that would consider seller financing, the first questions you should be asking is, why exactly are they getting out? And I'll kind of do a little bit of a role play in a little bit to talk about one of the properties that I had actually purchased owner financing. Okay. The offers that you make for seller financing, it's pretty much the standard offer that you would make even if you had bank financing. The difference is that when you write up the purchase offer, you don't necessarily have to have a financing contingency. The financing contingency would actually be the seller taking back the note. And that is one of the things that you have to make sure when you're doing the offer, that it's expressly put in there, and you have to make sure that the seller is considering it or would be willing to do owner financing kind of beforehand, which is why you have to listen to what they have to say. And like I said, some of the benefits of owner's financing for the seller. Say you're retiring, you've got $1 million portfolio, you have $1 million in equity. You've had it for 40 years, and you don't want to pay capital gains tax on that $1 million. Well, if you owner finance it to somebody, you can take that, you can make sure that you're getting a monthly paycheck, so you don't run out of money, you don't run out of your money. You get it monthly, and then you can spread that tax liability out over several years instead of getting hit with one big chunk of money, because as everybody knows, capital gains tax takes a big chunk of your money. And a lot of times, you know, at the point of retirement, you're not going to 1031 exchange it into another property. So you really have to try and figure out how to be creative so you avoid paying Uncle Sam as much money as possible. One of the other benefits of owner financing is, you know, not having to deal with a bank. So you're talking about a lot lower costs for both the seller and the buyer. You know, you don't have closing costs, you don't have to pay the added interest, you don't have to do the appraisal 9 times out of 10. And a lot of times with owner finance properties, the seller, the only thing they're interested in is making sure that they get their asking price. So if a seller is saying, I've got these properties that are worth $1 million, you could go in and say, well, here's the situation. We can either offer you $1 million, we'll give you your asking price, but here are the terms that I want to set. You have to take the note back. And a lot of times I start out with no interest. I'll pay you $1 million, no interest. I want to amortize it over 30 years and, you know, and no money down. Basically, anything that you can get the seller to agree to is up for grabs. I mean, if you said to them, you know, I want to do this, but I need you to throw in a KFC dinner. I mean, I wouldn't recommend that, but if they agree to it, then you can put it in the contract, because that's what seller financing is. So what I always do is I always start out with my pie in the sky offer. You know, I'll give you the $1 million. I don't want any interest. I want to amortize it over 30 years, and I don't want to put any money down, because one of the selling points for the buyer, one of the convincing points for you as a buyer, is you can say, look, part of the reason that I'm coming to you with this offer is because I know there's deferred maintenance, and this deferred maintenance has to be corrected so I can cash flow this property and get it livable. So if you allow me to do it with no money down, the money that I was going to put into the down payment for this property, I can use it for fixing that deferred maintenance, and I can maintain my tenant base so the cash flow continues to come in. And a lot of times the seller will be, you know, if you put it to them in terms that they can understand and ways they could sell them, they'd be like, you know what, that's completely acceptable. Now, a lot of the things that I'm talking about is mainly, for me, it's residential. I haven't done a multifamily yet, but the concept is still valid for multifamily, because, you know, I was talking to Ryan in the breakout room, and he had said that, you know, Jake and Gino had done a project where they had gone in and bought 2 apartment complexes for $11 million and got a $100,000 check at the closing, because they did 85% that they financed, and 15% the seller took back as a note. And that is completely valid. I mean, that is something that you could do all day long. If you find somebody that a mom and pop that just wants to get out of it, you know, something that's a definite value add, that's deferred maintenance. They've got a lot of deferred maintenance. Well, you guys know how to underwrite. You know, those are the things you're looking at. Is you've got to try and find those motivated sellers. And once you find the motivated sellers, you know, if you can get a bank to give you an 85% loan to value mortgage, and go back to them and say, would you take a note back for this? So then you're making 2 payments. You're paying the bank, you're also paying the previous owner, but, you know, you don't have any money in the deal yourself. So that increases the amount of money you still have for reserves and fixing that deferred maintenance. So you can actually start off on a pretty good footing if you can get somebody to take that, because not only did they take a seller note back, but the down payment, the closing costs came back to them at the closing table. So they were able to walk away, no money down, plus $100,000 in cash that they can dump into the property on day one.
That's perfect.
So, yeah.
That's awesome. Joseph, do you want to hit that question or those questions?
Larry,
Sure.
there were 2 questions. I'm gonna read one.
Absolutely.
From James. He had a question about the direct mailing that you mentioned previously. Are there a couple of key points to put in a direct mailer that you recommend or found to be effective?
Well, it's consistency. Okay. So I was actually just doing some research on this, and I read a study on something that said, the first mailing you get, I think it was 1 or 2% response rate. The second mailing is another 1 or 2%. The third mailing is another 1 or 2%. And by the time you get to the fifth mailing, you're at 75 to 80% response rate. So what you have to do is it has to be a direct mail marketing campaign. It can't be just a one and done. I mean, you can't just send like a postcard to 100 different people and then sit back and go, I don't understand why I'm not getting response. So you have to have it so to the point where you keep this mailing list of these motivated sellers that match the criteria that you're looking for. You start off by sending the first letter out, send the second letter the next month, the third letter the next month, and until you get to 4 or 5 letters. And then when you think about it, the expense of the direct mail marketing, you only have to close one deal to make the money back that you're putting into these, and then some. I mean, you're going to make much more money on these deals than what you're going to put into the direct mail marketing if you just close that one deal. And I guarantee you, if you keep consistent, keep sending it out, you're going to get the response rate, and you're going to find one deal. What is it? You have to underwrite 100 deals to buy one, 1 or 2.
Joseph, I see that you're going to hit those questions, but I just want to ask Larry one quick question.
Absolutely.
Larry, you had an awesome podcast about this specific question that might handle it a little bit easier, because so we stay on the topic of the seller financing. If you know the episode number, I'll put it in the notes or something like that.
I believe it was like 38 or 39. It was an episode with Chris Bizub, and he did a phenomenal job. That's what he does. He does the direct mail. Was for an hour, just sat there and riveted us with his information about direct mail marketing. And he basically said that same thing. You just need to get that one deal.
Yep. Okay. I'll put that. I got it. I'll put it in the notes for everybody.
Absolutely. I think it was 38 or 39. You'll have to let me know if my memory served me correctly.
All right. Okay. Brian had a question. What's your typical exit strategy out of the owner financed loan? Are you looking to refi after 3-5 years? Oh, you guys hear me? Larry?
I can hear you, yes.
Are you there? Okay, sorry.
You hear me now, Larry?
Yeah, all of a sudden you guys froze on my end, so I was like, uh-oh.
Oh, okay. I was in the middle of the reading the question.
Okay, what was the question again? I'm sorry.
So Brian's question, what's your typical exit strategy out of the owner financed loan? Are you looking to refi after 3 to 5 years into a traditional mortgage, or are you looking to hold it as long as possible? How do you explain that to the seller? When will they actually get their lump payment?
Well, what I generally do, the way I've structured all of my loans is I've done a 30-year amortization with a 5-year balloon payment. And what that means is I pay for it with the longest term possible. And, after 5 years, I've been able to season it. I've been able to stabilize the property. I've been able to get it with a consistent rental history. And it's easier to go to the bank with a stabilized property that you already own than it is to go to a bank with an unstable property that you don't own yet. So that's one of the benefits of owner financing is you can go to the bank and say, I have a 5-year rental history with this property now, and this is what I want, and generally they'll give it to you, plus you're taking advantage of all the work you've done on it and the appreciation.
Okay, great, thank you.
Oh, no problem.
I have another questions coming in.
Yeah.
Hold on. So how would you go about, this is Jamie, how would you go about setting up a deal with a seller that's offering 50% on the financing, especially in today's market with lender reserve requirements?
Well, obviously with a 50% owner financing, you can go to the banks and say, because technically speaking, when you're talking about an owner finance property, that 50% owner financing is considered your down payment. And I honestly don't know any property that wouldn't go, or any bank that wouldn't say, okay, you go to them and say, I've got a property, I'm putting 50% down on this property. The bank doesn't really need to know that it's a seller note. All they care about is that that's a 50% down payment for the property, you know, and anytime you've got that much skin in the game, then the banks are a little bit more lenient and a little bit easier to lend to. And that's for the most part, they don't really care how the money got deposited, because when you have somebody that's going to do a seller financing, you have to look at it. You have to kind of run it through your head. This is what's happening. The seller is lending you 50% of the property. Okay. So we'll use round numbers. You got $1 million property and they're willing to give you $500,000 for that property. Okay. They give you $500,000 cash. They don't actually give you the cash, but in the bank's mind, this is how it works. You've got $500,000 in cash that you're giving the seller in the form of a note that's your down payment. So the bank is saying, wow, this, you know, now the bank is saying, okay, they've got a first position mortgage, because the seller finance mortgage is actually going to take a second position to the mortgage. So now they've got a property that's valued at $1 million that they can foreclose on for $500,000 in rental or lending in a mortgage. So you're actually, that's the best case scenario right there. If they're willing to go 50%, just be like, I've got a 50% down payment, and go to the bank and say, here, I've got $1 million property or whatever it is, and I'm putting $500,000 down on it. Will you give me the other $500,000? And they'll say yes all day long.
All right, Jamie said, awesome. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And I'm available if anybody ever has any questions after this. I'll give you guys my email address. And I love talking real estate. You know, I'll give you my cell phone number. I have no problem looking at a project that you're looking at. So.
All right, Larry, let's keep going.
Yep. Okay. So no more questions?
There will be. So as you go.
I just wanted to make sure I wasn't going to step on anybody's toes. Okay. So when you're doing owner financing, one of the big things that you got to do is you got to make sure that you're in line with the Dodd-Frank regulations. And for our purposes of being on the buying side, the Dodd-Frank isn't really as big a deal for us as it is sellers. And the sellers, you know, you've got the Dodd-Frank guidelines. Let me move this over here so you guys can all see that. You know, you're looking for a specific group of people with Dodd-Frank. These are people more for the sellers that sit there and they do owner financing time and time again. And you just got to have the buyers who may not be as educated as somebody else be protected. So, you know, the stuff that I talk about a lot of it doesn't fall in Dodd-Frank. I just want you to be aware that it is out there. And if you decide to start a business where you're buying an owner finance property and you turn around and flip it owner finance for more money, you know, you got to pay attention to this. So, and the way I tell you is just make sure that you're using a good attorney, and the good attorney is worth its weight in gold. So, okay. Case study of an owner finance property. What I'm going to do is I'll go over my first property with you guys. I don't have it on the PowerPoint because I like to just talk about the numbers and try and have you visualize it. But the first property that I bought, we'll call it Harmon Street, and that's actually the street it's on. I was looking at this property. It was appraised for $65,000. This is the one where the woman got actually promoted out of state, so she was trying to run it from 3 states over. I went into the property, had some deferred maintenance on it, and I knew I wasn't going to offer a full price. I wasn't going $65,000 because that's just the appraised value. So I did what I always do. I started with my pie in the sky offer. I walked in and I talked to my real estate agent, who I had to actually school on how to do the owner finance deals. And I told him I'm going to offer $22,000, and she's going to take a note, no interest, no money down, because I've got to fix this deferred maintenance. And, you know, I want to make that offer. He was like, are you kidding me? He's like, that'll never fly. His name is Andrew. He's actually been my real estate agent since this. He goes, but you know what? He goes, I don't care. I'll take the offer to him. That's what you got to do. You got to find that person that'll just be like, I don't care what offer you give me. I'm going to throw it out there for him. And you'd be like, all right, you're my guy. He made the offer, wrote it up, sent it over .loop. It was signed in an hour. So,
wow.
So then what happened was I actually had I told him it was a stipulation in it. I wanted a property inspection. Well, the property inspection came back that the furnace was kind of old in the one apartment. So what I did was I went back and retraded the offer, and I said, look, it's going to cost me $4,000 for a new furnace. So I made the offer of 18,000, and she counter offered and signed it for 20. And I signed it. And the day we closed, it was no money down. And every payment that I make, there's zero interest on it. Every payment that I make comes off of principal. And that was 5 years ago. Now I own this property free and clear. It's valued at $65,000. So the day I took possession of it, I had $45,000 in equity that I could turn around and pull it out if I wanted to. And I didn't choose to at that point, but now, you know, I've got a free and clear property, $65,000, and it cash flows $1,800 a month.
Wow,
Nice.
man, that is awesome.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. So, and it doesn't take a lot of properties. Like I said, I've got 10 apartments right now. It doesn't take a lot of properties to get to financial independence. And, you know, part of the reason why I left my job was I heard this something that said, you know, my worst case scenario is everybody else's Monday. So if I had to go get another job, then, you know, I'm with everybody else that goes to work on Monday. So, you know, that's taking a chance.
I see. I see. Larry, Craig has a question.
Absolutely.
Does the agent get the full commissions on an owner finance property?
Yeah, it's just like a regular, regular property or a regular real estate transaction. The only difference is if there's no money down, usually you can offer enough money to cover. Like I'll say, you know, it's usually a 6% commission where I'm from. I'll say I'll give you 6% of the purchase price. So, you know, for my purposes on my first position, I would have had to come up with $1,200.
Mhm.
You know, for my down payment, but I didn't have to do that because what happened was the woman was so happy to be offloaded that she's like, I'll pay the commission
Oh, the
out
seller?
of my pocket. The seller did. The seller paid the commission out of her pocket. I went to the closing, closed everything, and I actually ended up with, I think it was like a $600 check coming back to me because when the way we closed, I got credit for some of the taxes that she had not paid that she should have paid.
Nice.
So, I mean, I turned around and took that check and paid the taxes on it, but, you know, it was kind of neat that I got that check back. So, but yeah, it's just like a standard real estate transaction. So when you close on it, somebody has to pay the brokerage fees or the real estate commissions.
Great.
Okay. All right. And the next kind, let me see if I can get this. All right. The next style, there's a couple, the other one is subject to mortgages. And I you know, I don't have a lot of time left. I don't think. I'm probably long-winded and I'm running short on some time because I want to do some questions and whatnot. But don't mistake a subject to mortgage for an assumption. The main difference between assumption and a subject to mortgage is when you assume a mortgage, the mortgage comes out of the seller's name and goes into your name. So say I'm buying a property from Joseph and I do an assumption, the mortgage comes right out of Joseph's name, goes into my name. A subject to property is you're buying a property with an existing mortgage that's in Joseph's name and it stays in Joseph's name. And then, you know, I start making the payments for that mortgage. Now you might be asking, why would Joseph want to leave this in his name? What are the benefits of that? And basically what I'll tell you is the only benefit that I can see that I've been able to find is if interest rates have changed drastically. Now say he's got a $500,000 mortgage on a property that I want to buy. Interest rates currently are 8%, but his original mortgage was 3%. But if I assume the mortgage, they could redo the interest up to 8%, which a lot of times a bank would want to do. But if we just do the subject to mortgage, then I'll be paying the 3% balance on that. So that saves 5% interest on my part. So that's a win-win for me all day long. So the unpaid mortgage is then calculated into the purchase price. So say Joseph's got this $1 million property. He's got a $500,000 mortgage existing on it currently. There's 3 different types of subject to mortgages that we'll talk about in a minute. But and I kind of covered that a little bit ahead. So reduce costs. Oh, this is another benefit of the subject to. There's no closing costs, no origination fees, no broker fees, and it's increased profits for the buyer on the subject to because this mortgage is already in place. all you have to do is make sure you're making the payments on time for the mortgage. And since it's already still in Yosef's name, Yosef gets he's notified almost immediately if there's an issue with this mortgage. And, and you can actually set it up to where, if I don't pay that mortgage on the day it's due, you need to know about it.
Mhm.
So, and there's a couple caveats with subject to that we'll cover here in a minute. The lower interest rate's a big selling factor. Okay, so here. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you have a question?
Brian's quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
For subject to, what
Yes.
tips do you have for dealing with insurance companies to avoid a bank getting wind of owner financing sale and potentially using the due on sale clause?
Well, a lot of times that was one of the caveats that I talk about in this. A lot of times banks, see, for banks, it's a hassle. It's a real pain, if you will, for them to do a due on sale clause. So most of the banks, as long as the note is still performing, they're not really going to exercise their due on sale clause. So it doesn't really, it's not as big a deal keeping it out of their way as like with the insurance company and that sort of thing. Very rarely will they do a due on sale clause. Now you have to be prepared because it is a real possibility. I know some of the banks out there, if they get wind that you actually sold the property, as soon as it transferred title, they may just to be difficult. But for the most part, it's more expense on their part. And as long as they get their money and they're getting paid, generally they won't cause a real giant problem. I've had a subject to mortgage where the bank representative was actually at the closing, and they knew why we were doing it. They checked my credit. They knew everything was good to go, so they were completely fine with it. And they said they weren't gonna invoke the due on sale clause. So that's just one of the things. You have to be prepared for it, but hope for the best and plan for the worst. That's what I say. So always have that exit plan. What am I going to do if the bank comes to me and says, you got to pay this mortgage off because we're not going to allow this to happen? Do you have an exit plan there? And a good Boy Scout or Girl Scout is going to have a plan. So they're gonna want to know exactly where, prior preparation or prior planning prevents poor performance. That was one of the things I learned in business school.
Larry, do you know
Yes.
how like a time frame? Because like, let's say they said, okay, we're going to exercise the due on sale clause.
Yep.
Now, is there a certain time frame to give you that maybe you can do some quick renovations to get the value up and then refi out or something? Or
I've never actually run into it, but I have heard banks coming to you, and they generally will give you some time. They're not going to say this is due by next week. They'll invoke it usually 120 days, 150 days, something like that. They'll give you a half year, 6 months. Be like, look,
Okay.
here's the situation. If they're going to be sticklers about it, then they're not going to want to foreclose on this property. Contrary to what a lot of people believe, banks don't like REO properties sitting on their books because it makes them look insolvent. It makes them look bad on their P&L. And, and it's just a hassle. They're not going to get the full mortgage amount. So they're going to want to work with whoever they can to try and make sure that they don't have to foreclose on these properties.
right.
That's not something a bank would do.
And do you know of any legal ramifications that could get you in trouble with the law?
As far as subject to,
Yes.
I have not run into anything. As long as, generally speaking, if you're using a lawyer that's skilled and is familiar with subject to mortgages, the lawyer will take care of making sure that you do everything on the straight and narrow. So I don't like to offer legal advice because I'm completely not even close to being an attorney. And and Joseph, if you know any good attorneys, I'd appreciate if you pass the information along and ask them and let me know later on.
All right, we'll do that.
All right.
You're better than me, so you're at least better than one attorney.
So just get your attorneys and get your attorney approval, and they'll make sure you do everything the correct way, generally speaking. So I don't think I can think of probably 100 different things that the bank could say, and as long as your attorney makes sure that it's not going to happen, then you'll be all right. So the first way is the traditional subject to mortgage. This is where the buyers pay the difference between the selling price and the existing mortgage in cash. So to get back to our Joseph example, Joseph's got a $500,000 mortgage that I'm going to assume. He's asking $1 million. I give him a check for $500,000 at the closing, assume the $500 mortgage, or not assume it, but take the mortgage over as subject to, and that's what a traditional one is. The second type of subject to mortgage is with a seller carryback, which is what they were talking about earlier with the seller financing with the carryback. So this is, say, we're getting back to the 50%. Yosef has that $1 million property, $500,000 existing mortgage. And I say to him, Yosef, would you take back a mortgage for $500,000? And, if he agrees to, then I can close with basically no money down. I'm taking over subject to mortgage and a note. So I have to pay two different $500,000 mortgages, one to Yosef and one to the bank. But it's the best case scenario for me is that you've got that 50% down payment. So you're actually starting out with quite a bit of cash that you didn't have to put down for a down payment. And then the wraparound subject to mortgage is the one that I was talking about earlier to Yosef and Nico on our pre-planning one. So say Yosef's got that $1 million property. There's a $500,000 existing mortgage on it. What happens is Yosef will give me a mortgage for that amount of at a higher rate. So for the $500,000 in equity that Yosef's got, he's making, we'll say 6% interest. Okay. The payments are all going to Yosef. Yosef takes that and pays his own mortgage for the $500,000 mortgage. Now the interest rate on the other mortgage is 5%. So for the $500,000 in equity, Yosef's making 6% interest. For the other $500,000, the bank is making 5%, and Yosef is putting a little bit of money in his pocket because he's making 1% on that $500,000. So Yosef's getting 6% on the whole lump sum, but he has to pay 5% of it for the first $500,000 to the bank. So I'm hoping that makes some sense to everybody. And like I said, I am available for any questions. I've only done a couple of the subject to, and and it worked out beautifully. Got a much better interest rate. And like I said, subject to is not an assumption, where an assumption actually goes into the buyer's name. Same mortgage, but the bank can say, well, the interest rates have gone up since then. Since you're assuming the mortgage, generally we'll raise the interest rate to what market rates are for an assumption. FHA, I believe, does a lot of assumable mortgages, not as much as they used to, but because they got, I'm thinking that if I remember reading correctly, 2008 mortgage crisis had a lot to do with assumable mortgage, things like that as well. The danger of subject to mortgages, like you said, is the payable on transfer clause. So they could call the entire amount of that due. So just make sure that you're hoping for the best, but plan for the worst. Okay. And, I had the other case study that I had was, I think it was my fourth property. The tenant was, or the seller was asking $75,000 for it. I went to him and I said, can we do owner financing? He said, no, I've got a mortgage on this, so I can't owner finance it. I said, okay, not a problem. I wasn't at that point, I wasn't prepared to go do a mortgage for the full amount. We'll go a year ahead, and a year later he comes to me and says, I still want to sell this property. Are you still willing to do that? And we did the wraparound mortgage. He had a $30,000 balance, so I gave him a wraparound mortgage for $75,000. And he actually didn't make any interest on the second mortgage because he charged me the exact same interest rate as what the other mortgage was. And at the time it was 4%, something like that. It was a lot less than what they were charging at the time. So that was one of the case studies, the second one that I did. So, and Nico, I promised you that I would go over that deal that I'm working on right now. So let me just make sure. Yep, that was the last slide. One of the things that owner financing is powerful with, if you make a name for yourself in owner financing, first of all, you'll be talking in front of a large group of really great people like you guys. So that's one benefit. The other benefit is I have two of the properties that I purchased, I bought from the same buyer. This gentleman is an out of state or out of country owner. He owned them from, I believe he lives in Israel. And I bought him 2 years ago, and I've been performing on time every time, making sure the taxes are paid in time. And he actually owns a portfolio of 8 properties that is 16 apartments, 16 units. And 3 weeks ago, I'm just driving down the road, And I get a text message, and it's from this gentleman, and he said, you know, I'm getting out of it completely, and I was interested in doing the owner financing because that worked out the best for me on the last two. And you've done a, you know, I like your honesty. I like that you're paying on time every time. Would you be interested in my 16 unit portfolio? And of course I said, yeah, yep.
Nice.
And I told him, I said, make sure you send me the addresses. And the next day I own all my properties in a town called Elmira in New York. It's about an hour south of me. And I went and drove the properties. They're in beautiful condition. And, you know, he said, listen, I want to get out of it. I don't want to hassle. He goes, I know that you perform. He wanted to give it to me for no money down. So I'm going to buy these 16 units, no money down. And I'm going to, and no interest rate. He's not going to charge me interest. He just wants to get the equity out of it. Yep. And I gave him his asking price. But like I told you guys, you know, you gotta not be afraid to hear no. You know, that's one of the problems that you're going to run into. A lot of times people are afraid of owner financing because they don't want to be told no. You know, it's not in our nature. I don't like to be told no, you know, but you know what? Being told no is a lot better than getting up for work on Monday.
True.
You know, working for somebody else, punching that 9 to 5 clock. So, you know, I go out and I just ask them, like, is this something you're willing to do? And I want to challenge you guys because my theory on it is that every single project that's out there can be creatively financed. Every single one. That's my personal opinion on it. And you know, you may be able to prove me wrong, but I think that with the right set of circumstances, every single property can be owner financed. But you've got to find out what their motivation is and how can you answer it, because that win-win situation is what's going to make you a pile of money for everybody. So, you know, and right now my real estate agent's drawing up the offer for the 8 properties, the 16 units.
Great.
So, yep.
Great.
Yep. And it's not going to be, he's not going to get a commission for it. He's actually, him and I are working out a side arrangement so the seller doesn't have to pay a commission. He's going to take a note back for his commission too. So I have absolutely zero money in this whole deal. And what they're talking about is I may actually get like a $30,000 check at closing because the taxes he is actually in a little bit in arrears on. So I'll be getting a rather large check that I'll have. I mean, it's going to taxes, but you know, it's when anytime you walk away from a closing with tax or a big check, it's a win situation. Yeah, and that's pretty much the owner financing. Like I said, I don't know if you guys want me to give my contact information if you wanted to put it in the notes.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Do you have any more questions or anything?
I have a question from Bobby. Hold on. So for seller finance, the owner of the property has to own the property free and clear?
Not necessarily, no. Basic, I mean, you could technically owner finance a property that the guy's only had for a couple months, you know, as long as the subject to is something that they're willing to work with and you're willing to work with. And, you know, as long as the bank is willing to work with it, you know, one of the ways you can frame it with the bank is, you know, the potential for, if they're selling it that quickly, there may be some underlying circumstances that are preventing him from making his payments on time or something like that. So, but no, you don't have to own, they don't have to own it. It makes it easier. I'll be honest with you. So when they own it free and clear, then you don't even have to deal with a bank. So that's a beautiful situation right there. But no, it's not a requirement. You just have to get more creative on how you're going to structure the deal.
Okay. Larry, how would you start bringing up the owner financing to the seller, and at what point?
At the point when you make an offer, that's usually when I do it. Because you'd be surprised at how many people tell you everything you need to know to frame the offer. And you can usually qualify the owner of the property as a potential seller financing candidate, or, you know, not motivated enough yet. But like with mine, my real estate agent, I just would go around and I'd look at the properties and I'd find the properties that I'm interested in based on the criteria that I have. So I'm looking for grass that isn't cut. I'm looking for, maybe the siding hasn't been painted. There's some scraping that needs to be done on the porch, things like that. Just signs of the landlord not doing what they're supposed to be doing, deferred maintenance. And then, that's one of those things where you can give them a call and say, are you interested in selling the property? Or if it's already on the market, that makes it even easier, because then you can go to them and say, I know this property has been on the market for a year. I mean, a year seems to be kind of the cutoff. A lot of times, if you have a property that's on the market for anything more than 6 months, generally the seller is motivated, because it's frustrating to sit there and not see your house be sold that quickly. And there's a couple of reasons why it may not be sold. They're asking too much, to be quite honest with you. That's just, you're asking a pie in the sky number, or there's just too much deferred maintenance for a lot of people. And you got to remember that the more problems that you learn how to solve, the more problems that you're okay taking care of, the more money you're going to make, because there are so many people out there that don't want to deal with deferred maintenance. The properties that I drive by and it looks like, there's a car in the driveway up on blocks, and, there's some grass in the yard that's not getting cut. You don't look at that kind of thing, because that's all cosmetic. You can fix that kind of thing. What you got to look at is you've got to look at the structure of the house. You got to look at the roof, just check the bones of the house. And, cosmetic stuff is an easy fix.
Mm-hmm.
If you go into the basement and there's a big hole in the basement and the basement is bowed in, then, you can fix that problem. If you're not afraid of that problem, you can fix it. It has to be reflected in the sale price.
I see. Larry, thank you very much. I think there are a lot of golden nuggets here. And whether or not you're looking to multifamily or residential, I think the seller financing tactics and tips are all applicable.
They are. Absolutely. You just got to find that right deal.
Right. Looks like time is clicking, Nico.
Yeah.
Any more questions, guys? All right.
I think that it's a lot to digest for people in one shot. This really should be an ongoing conversation. And for all of you out there, I would absolutely use Larry to reach out to and continue the conversation with, because honestly, like there's so much in this meetup that I just have to review and continue the conversation, because the more you talk about it and the more, I guess, familiar you become with it. But Larry, I want to try to make it within the next minute or so, try to make it a little bit more real for these people with some first steps. So you've gotten told no plenty of times, right? Do you have a number or a percentage that you've gotten told no?
35, 40% easily.
That's,
if not more.
It's a real number. So look, that's a real big number, and that would scare most people off. So that's real, guys. 30, 40% no. And then do you have a prior conversation with the people to have some sort of a relationship before you ask the seller financing?
On the direct mail marketing, I do. I prefer direct mail marketing because that takes out all the middle people. And so I don't have to deal with brokers. I don't have to deal with real estate agents. I can get right to the seller. And, like you said, listen to that Chris Bizub podcast episode for the Real Estate Marathon. And he basically said that's the golden person that you're trying to get to, is that seller. And the less people in the middle, the easier it is to not hear no. If you can tell them, this is what we're going to do, this is how I'm going to solve your problem, you have to frame it with, this is how I'm going to help you. I mean, I'm in it for, taking care of this property, but it doesn't do me any good if you don't get what you want out of it as well. And right. If you get to that seller, the direct mail marketing is probably the best one. Or even, driving for dollars. If you see that for rent sign, try it. Give them a call. Be like, oh, you got a property for rent, an apartment for rent. I'm not looking to rent it, but I was wondering, are you in the market to possibly sell that? And if so, could we talk about what kind of numbers you're looking for, or, maybe take a look at it.
Right. Now, so I put that link in the chat box, so everybody can get that link. They could just click on it and they can listen to that episode, which is definitely, it benefited me a lot as well. Had a lot of questions also about direct mail campaigns, and that answered a lot of questions. Now, so people are going to hear no, and then you continue to pursue, right? So you don't stop. Now,
yeah.
Now let's break that down a little bit more. So so when you're talking to somebody and you're starting that conversation of seller financing, you want to always frame it, you're saying, as them benefiting somehow. So you have to, like you said, understand what they want and what they're looking for to get out of it.
Absolutely.
And then you give that to them if it's feasible for you. Now, do you offer them a price right away, or when do you offer that?
You very rarely will you want to talk about pricing right up front. You just want to find out, and you can't go right to the selling. I mean, you gotta coax them out. You gotta take them out to dinner. You gotta wine them and dine them a little bit. I mean, that's figuratively, of course, but you can't jump right to, I want to buy your house. This is what I'm willing to pay you, because you want to literally get them to the point where they trust you. You're developing a relationship with them. And that's, like I said, that's more so if it's listed, then that's a whole different beast. But on the direct to the seller, you just gotta try and find out, be sympathetic. I mean, you have to actually care about what they want. You can't fake it, because a lot of people know. You're retiring, you want to move down and be with your grandkids in Marina Del Rey or wherever, Boca Raton or wherever you're moving. But the only thing stopping you is this duplex. Well, let's get this off your hands. Let's take care of this. Let's get you out of the state. Let's get you into the fun and sun with your grandkids. This is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to help you get your goals accomplished. And, and they respond a lot to that, because I say, I've got kids. When my kids have kids, I don't care what happens. I'm going to be there with them wherever they are. A duplex isn't going to stop me. If this is what I have to do to sell it to you, owner financing, to get out of the state, to get closer to my grandkids, that's what I'm going to do.
Awesome. Yeah. So I think, so for first actionable steps, you start contacting sellers.
Yep.
You start, asking, saying, let's do a deal. Let's make it happen. You try to get to the bottom of what they need. Then you bring up the seller financing once you have somewhat of a relationship or rapport with them. And then you start negotiating that seller finance aspect
Yep.
of it. And
Yep.
and if it doesn't work for you, have you ever backed out?
I got close to backing out, but generally with you always put that property inspection contingency in there. And if the report comes back that there's more damage or repairs needed, you can always go back and retrade the selling price. You can say, look, this is, this right here is going to cost me $4,000 to fix. Are you willing to come down to my price, which is that first house that I offered in 22, and then it came back with a bad furnace. And I offered to, I told them I wanted $4,000 off of the price, and they offered to go down to 2,000. I told them, you know what, in interest of everything, you've been great. I'll split the difference with you. I'll eat $2,000, you eat $2,000, and everybody walked away from the table happy. I walked away really happy because I had another $45,000 in equity. But she was able to not have to deal with this duplex ever again.
Awesome.
So,
all right,
yeah.
I think we're gonna start wrapping it up. But Joseph and I and Larry, if we're all welcome to stay on. But Larry, I want to ask you one thing that you think that people can do today or tomorrow to get this started for themselves.
One of the things how I started was you really got to pick your market. You really got to know, is it going to be in your neighborhood? Do you know the neighborhood? And then once you decide where you want to invest, because this is easier to do if you live in the area that you're at, that you're buying in. And then, just check the classified ads, get online, check Zillow, check realtor.com, see if something has been listed for 6 months or over. And if they've been listed for 6 months or over, there is a definite opportunity there. That's where you should start. Look for opportunities wherever you see them. Either do the direct mail. When you're driving down the street, if you see a house that has the grass is, we all know what house I'm talking about. You guys all have that house. So you're driving down the road and you're like, oh, that guy just doesn't care what his house looks like. This guy's tired of being a homeowner. What are we going to do? How can I get in on this house? So just do that. I mean, start looking for your neighborhoods and start looking for those potentially motivated sellers, realtor.com and all that. Anything over 6 months listed, been on there 6 months, on Zillow for 6 months to a year, call them up and be like, look, dude, there's a reason why this has still been listed. Let's find out what the situation is.
Great, Larry. Thank you very much once again for presenting this to us. And I learned a lot myself, and I believe other attendees also learned a lot from you.
I hope so. And like I said, you guys have my email address and everything. So,
Larry,
reach out.
can I have your phone number? I need to talk to you about some things.
Yeah,
I have
absolutely.
a property, and it kind of goes with what you're saying. If you could help me out, I appreciate it.
Not a problem, man. And that
Yeah.
was Bobby, right?
Yes, sir.
I'll give all you guys my cell phone number. Can I announce it over here?
Oh yeah, you can do that. You can do that, Larry.
Yeah, I'll answer. It's
And we'll also put it in the chat box too. What is that?
It's 315
Mhm.
651
Mhm.
5597.
97. I put it on. Thank you. And you're welcome
Thank you
to
very
stay a
much.
little bit, Bobby or James, if you want. We're gonna wrap up today. Thank you everybody for coming. Next time, it's July. Is that 27th or
29th.
29th? Will be Hadar. Hadar is one of my mentor, and many of you know him. He's from New Zealand and investing in the U.S. Sometimes we think out of our backyard is not good for the numbers, and think about it, and we look at out of state. He's looking out of international. So it's going to be a great meeting with him next session. Okay.
And Hardar was on our podcast too, so you can definitely, if you want to preview that, it's on there too.
Yes, it will be amazing. Thank you very much, everyone.
Larry,
Take care,
thank you very
guys.
much.
You guys are welcome anytime.